the smell of antiseptic never really leaves you. After 8 years working in hospitals, first as a scrub tech, then grinding through night shifts while finishing my nursing degree, then fighting for every inch of my way into the surgical residency program, that smell became home. More home than the house I grew up in, anyway. I remember the exact morning I got the call. February early, the kind of cold that makes your fingers stiff before you even step outside. I was standing in the hospital parking garage, still in my scrubs from a double shift, when my phone buzzed and I saw my program director's name. I almost insulted. I thought something had gone wrong. I thought maybe they'd found a reason to cut me. "Congratulations, Dr. Whitmore," she said. "You matched." I sat down on the concrete floor of that parking garage and cried. Not delicate crying, the ugly kind, the kind you do when something you've been holding on to for so long finally lets go. I called my mother first. She didn't answer. I called my father. He picked up on the second ring. "Dad," I said. "I matched. I'm going to be a surgical resident." There was a pause, then, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your brother will be so happy to hear that." That pause. I didn't register it then. I filed it somewhere in the back of my mind and kept moving, because that's what I'd always done. My name is Vivian, though most people in my life have spent years making me feel like I had to earn the right to it. I'm 31 now. I became a doctor the hard way, which is the only way I knew how to do anything. My father remarried when I was 9, and my stepmother came with a son, my stepbrother, Alec, who was 7 at the time and according to everyone in our family, basically hung the moon. I want to be fair here. Alec isn't a bad person. He's charming, actually. He knows how to walk into a room and make every person in it feel like they're the most important one there. He became a real estate developer in his mid-20s and did well enough that my father would mention it at least once in every conversations we ever had. Alec just closed on a property in Austin. Alec's thinking about expanding to Nashville. Alec's got a real head for business, you know. And I would nod, and I would go back to studying. I don't think my father ever meant to make me feel invisible. I don't think he sat down and decided that his biological daughter mattered less. But intent and impact are two different things, and I spent most of my teenage years eating that gap for breakfast. My mother had passed when I was 16, pancreatic cancer, fast and brutal, and after that it was just me, Dad, my stepmother Rhonda, and Alec. And the three of them had a gravitational pull to each other that I never quite managed to enter. I focused on school because school was the one place where effort directly translated to outcome. I got a scholarship. I got a second one. I worked night shifts at a diner all through undergrad and weekends at the hospital as a scrub tech to pay for what the scholarships didn't cover. My father offered to help pay for my medical school applications, a gesture I genuinely appreciated. But when the bills came, something always came up. Alec needed seed money for his first property. Alec's car broke down. Alec was going through a rough patch. I stopped asking. I took out loans. I kept moving. By the time I matched into surgical residency, I was already used to being the person in my own family who surprised people. Not because they believed in me, because they forgot to think about me at all. The residency program was in Boston. I'd be moving in July. But before that, the program held a white coat ceremony, a formal recognition event for the incoming residents, kind of like a graduation. Partners, parents, mentors were all invited. It was held at the hospital's main auditorium, a beautiful old room with high ceilings and dark wood paneling, and every resident would walk across a stage to have their white coat placed on their shoulders by someone who mattered to them. When the program coordinator asked me who I wanted to place my coat, I didn't have to think long. I asked my father. He said yes immediately. "Of course, Vivian, I wouldn't miss it for the world." I replayed that sentence more times than I should have. I want to be honest about that. I held on to it. I made it mean something. The ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in late May. I'd flown home to spend the week before with family, partly to reconnect and partly because I was exhausted, and my apartment in my residency city felt too empty for the emotional weight I was carrying. I stayed in my old room, which Rhonda had converted into a guest room with a scented candle where my old desk used to be. The week was fine, polite. My father took me to dinner one night, just the two of us, and he told me he was proud of me. I remember feeling something loosen in my chest when he said it, something I hadn't known was wound that tight. Thursday night, 2 days before the ceremony, I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard my father on the phone in the living room. He wasn't whispering. I don't think he thought I could hear him. "I told you, the timing is just bad," he said. "She'll understand. She's always been the resilient one." I set down my mug. "Alec, this is important. This is a once-in-a-year thing. The Harmon deal only works if we're both there in person." A pause. "You know your sister loves you. She'll be fine." I walked out of the kitchen and went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed in my scented candle guest room for a long time. My hands were in my lap. I kept thinking about the phrase "the resilient one." How it sounds like a compliment. How it's actually just a reason to need you less. I didn't go downstairs that night. I told myself I'd misunderstood. I told myself I'd wait and see. Friday morning, my father knocked on my door before breakfast. He sat on the edge of the bed and he looked at his hands and he said, I need to talk to you about tomorrow. I already knew, but I let him say it. Alec had a major property closing in Phoenix that weekend. A deal he'd been working on for months, a commercial development with a partner group that had flown in specifically for that date. My father had been advising him on the financing side and was listed on the documentation. The closing couldn't be moved. The signing was Saturday morning, which meant they'd have to fly out Friday evening. I know this isn't what you wanted, my father said. I'm so sorry, Vivian. I'm so proud of you. I'll be there in spirit. I heard myself say, it's okay, Dad. I don't know why I said that. Force of habit, maybe. Or because I didn't want him to see how completely unsurprised I was. He squeezed my shoulder and went downstairs. I heard him and Rhonda talking quietly in the kitchen. I heard Rhonda laugh at something. I sat with my phone in my hand for about 20 minutes before I called my mentor, Dr. Patterson. She's the attending physician who wrote my recommendation letters, who talked me off the ledge twice during the application cycle, who answered my panicked midnight texts about whether I was good enough. She picked up on the third ring. I explained the situation. I kept my voice very steady. I think I was actually proud of how steady I kept it. Vivian, she said when I finished, I would be honored to place your coat. I thanked her. I hung up. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower so no one would hear me. The ceremony was at 2 o'clock on Saturday. I wore the dress I'd bought specifically for it, a deep green wrap dress that my mother would have liked. I did my own hair. I drove myself. Dr. Patterson was already there when I arrived, standing near the entrance in a blazer, holding a small bouquet of white flowers she'd brought for me. I almost lost it right there in the parking lot. You look like a doctor, she said, and handed me the flowers. The auditorium filled up quickly. Families in their good clothes, people taking photos, the low warm hum of people who were proud of someone. I found my seat and I looked at the program and I saw my name in print, Vivian Whitmore, MD, and I thought, I did this. Whatever else happens, I did this. The ceremony started. One by one, residents crossed the stage. Parents, spouses, mentors stepped forward to settle white coats across shoulders. There were a lot of tears in that room. When my name was called, Dr. Patterson stood up. We walked up the steps together. She lifted the coat and placed it on my shoulders, and then she stepped back and looked at me, and her eyes were bright, and she said quietly, just to me, your patients are going to be so lucky. I gripped the edge of that coat and I thought about every night shift, every loan payment, every dinner I ate standing over a sink because I was too tired to sit down. I thought about my mother, who used to say that the only thing anyone could ever take from you was what you let them keep. I didn't cry on stage. I saved that for later. What I didn't know, while I was standing up there, was that my father's flight from Phoenix had been canceled. He called me during the reception. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I stepped outside the auditorium and answered. Vivian, the flight got canceled. We're trying to get rebooked. I'm so sorry. I should have, Dad, I said. It's okay. It's not okay. I know it's not okay. The ceremony is over, I said. Dr. Patterson placed my coat. It was beautiful. A long pause. Oh, he said. She brought me flowers, I said. White ones. Another pause, longer. Vivian, I have to get back to the reception, I said. I'll talk to you soon. I went back inside. I got a glass of sparkling water, and I stood with my cohort, and I laughed at someone's story about their intern year, and I felt, I'm trying to find the right word. I felt like a person who had been standing in a doorway for a very long time and had finally just walked through it. My father texted that night. Then the next morning. Then a card arrived at my apartment a week later with a check inside and a handwritten note that said he was proud of me and that he'd make it up to me and that he knew words weren't enough. I put the card in a drawer. I deposited the check because I had loans and I wasn't sentimental enough to be stupid about it. I moved to Boston in July. I started residency. I was bad at it for a while and then I got better, the way you do when you stop being afraid of being bad at it. My father called every couple of weeks. The conversations were polite. He told me about Alec's projects. I told him about my cases, the parts I was allowed to share. He said he was proud. I said thank you. We stayed in the shallow end. In November, about 4 months into my residency, I got an unexpected day off, a rare gift, and I used it to drive up to visit Dr. Patterson, who had retired from active practice but still lived in the area and had, inexplicably, become one of my favorite people on earth. We had lunch at a diner she liked, the old-fashioned kind with laminated menus and pie rotating in a glass case. Halfway through my grilled cheese, she asked me how I was doing. Not how residency was going, how I was doing. I told her about my father, not all of it. Enough. The ceremony, the phone call, the polite check in the drawer, the years of dinners where I talked about my MCAT scores, and he talked about Alec's latest venture, the way I'd learned to be the resilient one because no one ever asked me if I wanted to be. Dr. Patterson listened without interrupting, which is something very few people know how to do. When I finished, she didn't offer advice. She just said, "You know, some people show their love in the only language they know. The problem is, it's not always your language." I thought about that for a long time. The following spring, something happened that I didn't expect. Alec called me. Not my father, Alec himself, which he'd never done before, not once in all the years we'd technically been family. I almost didn't recognize the number. "Hey," he said. "This is weird, I know. But I need to tell you something, and I didn't want to do it through Dad." He told me that the Phoenix deal, the one that had pulled my father away from my ceremony, had started to fall apart in the months after the closing. Zoning issues, a partner group that hadn't been fully honest about the site's commercial history, regulatory complications that had apparently been visible to anyone paying attention. My father had advised Alec to proceed. Alec had trusted him. "I lost a lot of money," Alec said, "and I was angry for a while. At Dad, at myself." He paused. But then I started thinking about what he missed to be there with me, and I realized it wasn't just money I cost him. I didn't say anything. "He talks about you differently now," Alec said, like he's catching up on something. I still didn't know what to do with that. I thanked Alec for calling. We hung up. I sat in my call room at the hospital and stared at the ceiling for a while. Here's the thing about being the resilient one. It doesn't mean you don't feel things. It means you've had a lot of practice feeling them privately. You learn to hold your own grief with both hands so no one else has to help carry it. You learn that the people who should have been there sometimes aren't, and you build a life anyway. And the life you build can be genuinely good, even if there are things in it shaped like absences. My father called me on a Sunday morning in April. He asked if I had a few minutes. I said yes. He talked for a long time about the Phoenix deal, about the choices he'd made, about patterns he'd started to see when he looked back over the years. He cried a little. He apologized. Not in the greeting card way, not with broad strokes, but with specifics. The ceremony. The diner dinner where he'd mentioned Alec 3 times before asking me a single question about my life. The years when I was drowning in loans and he'd found other places to put his money. I listened. I didn't tell him it was fine. I didn't tell him he was forgiven, because forgiveness isn't something you can hand over in a phone call like a receipt. But I told him I heard him. And I told him that I'd like to keep talking, if he wanted. He said he wanted. I don't know what my father and I are now. We're not what we were, which honestly isn't a loss. We're something newer and more honest, which is harder but better. He came to Boston in the fall, and we walked through the public garden and had dinner at a place that wasn't fancy but had good soup, and he asked me about my patients without me having to steer the conversation, and he listened when I answered. At the end of dinner, he hugged me for a long time, longer than he usually did, and he said, "I have a lot to make up for." I said, "We have time." Dr. Patterson always told me that the most dangerous thing in medicine is the assumption that you know what you're dealing with before you've done the work to find out. She meant it about diagnoses. But I've thought about it a lot in other contexts. My father had a diagnosis of me that he'd written years ago and never updated. The resilient one, the self-sufficient one, the one who would be fine. The problem with resilience is that it looks like not needing anything. And if you look like you don't need anything, people stop offering. I need things. I've always needed things. I just got very good at not showing it, because showing it never seemed to change the outcome anyway. That's changing now. Slowly. One honest conversation at a time. I'm in my 2nd year of residency. I'm tired in ways I didn't know were possible, and I'm also more certain than I've ever been that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Last month, I assisted on a procedure that I'll carry with me for the rest of my career, a 12-year-old with a complication so rare my attending had only seen it twice. We were in that operating room for 9 hours. When it was over and the kid was stable, I stood in the scrub room and felt something I can only describe as purpose. Dense and clean, like a stone you could hold in your palm. My white coat hangs on the back of my door at home. I straighten it every morning before I leave. Sometimes I think about that Saturday in May, Dr. Patterson's steady hands on my shoulders, the weight of the coat settling in. Some people walk you down the aisle. Some people hand you flowers in a parking lot and tell you that your patients are going to be lucky. I've learned to know the difference. And I've learned that the second kind of love, the kind that shows up and stays, is the kind worth building your life around.